Hello, I'm Kent Lasnowski, president of the San Damiano College for the Trades. Things are going well for the college right now. We are continuing to work with the state of Illinois to get our operating authority. We're hoping to be open for the fall. Right now we're in one of the potential shops for the fall, our Carpenter shop. So it's great to be here with you as we continue getting ready to open up a pioneer class for San Damiano College for the Trades. Today we are blessed to be with one of the great Norbertine priests that's working at the Corpus Christi Priory on the same campus with San Damiano College for the Trades. His name is Father Gregory, and we're going to be enjoying a conversation about the trades and what their theological meaning is, how they fit into the life of a Christian. So, Father Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait for this conversation. Just for those out there who don't know you, don't know about the Norbertines, could you tell us a little bit about, how God called you to be a priest and moreover, how he called you into the Norbertine order?
Well, yeah, they were at the same time.
Okay.
I grew up with the Norbertines since I was just a little guy, made my first communion there, and then ultimately worked there with my dad. He was a contractor, but then he retired. I was the youngest of 14, so I came along and grew up during his retirement, more or less. And so he would work at our abbey doing weekly repairs, and I would tag along. And so I learned a lot just doing that. Ultimately, when I discerned I was called to do something more, then the Norbertines was the logical decision for me. Of course, they tested that in a couple of different ways. But anyhow, that's how I came to be a Norbertine.
Wow, so you grew up around them. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned you worked with your dad, and there's something that sounds so romantic and beautiful about that, but when it comes down to brass tacks, work is work. And one thing I've been thinking about is as I'm remodeling things, and as you talk to people who are out there in the trades, is this element of work that's punitive. People seem to think that work is a punishment. And do you have thoughts about that? Is it kind of like, let me put it in a family context, right? So let's say, my son is misbehaving and I give him some chores to do as a punishment. Is that what God did when he kicked us out of the garden and made us work? Do you think it was a punishment like that? And if so, why? What do you think about that?
Well, it was a punishment, but because God is a loving Father, it was a medicinal punishment. He gave us what we basically bargained for. We wanted to be on our own, and so he let us experience what it's like to be on your own. But being a loving Father, he never left us. The struggle has always been when we leave God. And so in the beginning, to go back to Genesis, when God created Adam and Eve and placed Adam in the garden, he gave him two rules, you could say, to operare, it says in the Vulgate, and custodire, to work in the garden, but it's in the idea of a cooperative with God. And man is to lead the creation that God has introduced him to in a very dignified, beautiful way. There was nothing laborious about it. The labor entered in after original sin, when God punished man and said, now you will labor in labore, in sudore, in labor and in sweat. You will now work the ground, and it will resist your efforts. And that wasn't because really God inflicted that on Adam. It's because Adam had inflicted this on creation by his rebellion, his turning away from God. So God in his mercy lets creation still be subject to man, but man is now going to experience resistance, the resistance of creation. That's why we have weeds and thorns and thistles.
That's really interesting, and it makes me think about, in the ancient Near East cultures and the Greek cultures, the different answers to the question, why is the world full of suffering and why is work so laborious? It seems like that answer you're talking about is different from so many other options. Like if you look at ancient Near East Babylonian ideas, they say, well, it's like this because the god Marduk needed someone to do some labor for him, right? Yeah, slave labor. And that was the way it was from the get-go, and in the Greek tradition, the gods needed someone to give them some food, right? And so here's humans offering these things up to the gods. And Christianity is just so radically different from that when you really get down to it, that our work is not somehow slave labor or strictly this mean-hearted punishment, but it's a cooperation in what God is already doing as a wise, loving creator and as you say, father too. So that's cool, the Christian difference coming out there. And so now we're kind of getting into this like, okay, yes, there's a punishment, and when there's something we need to learn, that when we try to do it on our own, all we get is weeds, and when we cooperate with God, we get something marvelous. That's a start for a positive account of work, and I like that. Another thing to start to think about that comes to my mind is like, okay, through salvation history, we come to the fullness of time, the incarnation, and God says, I'm going to become incarnate as a laborer, as a carpenter. We could just wax theological about that. Why do you think that is?
Well, Jesus was a carpenter because it was the Father's will. And that really is where the healing comes, where we obey God, where we do what He created us to do. Now, the beautiful part is, why did God will that Jesus be a carpenter, a laborer, so that whereas He had called us in the beginning to cooperate with Him in a way which was self-perfecting by His providence, we chose our own way, which brought labor. And Jesus says, I'm going to show you the Father's love, right? Who sees me sees the Father. And what does He do? He collaborates with us. He doesn't just cooperate, He collaborates. He works with us in our labor. And then He says something beautiful, right? Come to me, all you who labor. It's always the same word. It goes all the way back to Genesis 3.
Okay.
Come to me, you who labor and are heavy burdened. Why are we heavy burdened? Because we still resist the medicine. And really then it becomes further enhanced and it beats us up more because we are too much in competition with each other, right? We get selfish in our motives. And so Jesus becomes a laborer so that He can share with us in the very burden we brought on ourselves. Come, you who labor and are burdened, I will give you rest. Learn from me. I am meek and humble of heart.
Wow.
And so that's what Jesus does. Now, there's another beautiful dimension, that Jesus was a craftsman. So what does He do as a craftsman? He really helps the children of God right where they're at, in their homes, and making their journey on earth more bearable, more comfortable. And I'm sure Jesus, learning from His father Joseph in their carpentry trade, I'm sure they cut everybody a lot of slack. If somebody couldn't pay, they didn't say sorry.
Yeah.
No, they exercised the very rule of mercy Jesus calls us to do in the Gospels. He was living the gospel before, of course, He proclaimed it in His public ministry. And
that's interesting what you say there. It reminds me of something Benedict XVI said in his encyclical Caritas in Veritate. He says that at the heart of all economics, of all business, is the principle of gratuitousness, of more than just gratefulness, but gracedness, gift. And unless you start with that idea of even the economic relationship we have with people is ultimately about gift giving and gift receiving. If we don't start with that, we'll never have a just economic system. And so what you say about the mercy of God being demonstrated by St. Joseph in the way they would have done business is absolutely a great insight. Now that that kind of leads me to another thing that I've been wondering, curious about, is, okay, so we have Jesus to look up to, Joseph to look to as sort of models of what does it mean to be a good redemptive worker, but you've been in the trades for a lot of your life, and so I'd love to hear, who inspired you in the trades? Is there a particular boss or a colleague or someone that showed you what good work meant?
Yeah, well, I learned a lot from my father and my brothers. So my dad, by the time I came along, my dad was working in a father and son business, largely remodeling additions. And each of my brothers had a specialty. One was a cabinet maker, one electrician, one was plumber and painter. And so, but I was very young, so I usually had the grunt work of cleaning out the truck when they got home from work, or going in the basement in tight places as I grew a little older. But I learned from each of them to bear their responsibility. And of course, it wasn't always like a symphony, because they were sons of a father also, and so they always had their opinion. And so I saw all that also. I learned from my father especially that sense of responsibility for the duties of his state in life, for raising his family in the face of sometimes great odds, even injustice that he experienced in his work. And so that's where I got kind of my grassroots training. But since my dad retired when I was still a teenager, I never really worked with him in the business as such. The interaction we did, the collaborative we did, was at our Abbey. He would come one day a week, and because he wanted to keep busy. And so at that time, our Abbey was a fledgling community. We didn't have a lot of money for repairs, so Dad basically donated his labor, and I came along once a week to take care of repairs. I learned a lot that way. Then I went to work after I graduated for an old German fellow, and he was inspiring to me because he always took time to explain things. And you could see the bottom line for him wasn't the dollar, it was actually trying to help people. But one thing that I remember about him is he would say to me, Martin, because my name was Martin at that time, Father Gregory now, but Martin, you got to take time to smell the flowers. And that kind of puts labor into context, right? Because every aspect of our labor, of our craftsmanship, is meant to enhance the world, but not to enhance the world in the industrious sense of the giants of the Old Testament. They got to do it all by themselves, but to make it easier for others. And the common good, right? And it's like Jesus in the book of Hebrews, for the joy which lay before him, he endured the cross. Well, what was the joy that lay before him? Precisely our good and our redemption. And therefore, he even makes us his brothers and sisters. And so I think that really has to penetrate our Christian notion of labor in general, but of craftsmanship specifically here.
Well, it's kind of a turning on the head, right? Because so many folks are so committed to the utilitarian approach of get the most done you can in the least hours, regardless of the cost to craftsmanship and care and what that does to the worker. So to hear you say that chief insight was smell the roses, that's a really interesting thing to hear in this world. So I appreciate that.
I guess kind of taught me to see my work as part of creation.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
An element of creation.
Right,
when I get buried in a project, I can get kind of tunnel vision.
Right, and not like toward laziness, but realizing the right context for the work.
Yeah,
right.
Enjoying the leisure that God actually put us here for, right?
Yes.
I mean, when He created us, the work we were to do was beautiful. It was cooperation with God. It was like a symphony.
Wow.
Labor was not really part of it.
Yeah.
And we brought that on ourselves. But Jesus calls us back to that. We do it for the good of our brothers and sisters and to give joy to our Father in heaven.
So let's say, and I guess this can be kind of a final question that we think about. Let's say, for the fathers out there, the dads, they've got kids and, they want to pass something on about labor to their kids. And this question comes out of a weird thing I discovered when I was talking to high schoolers, is that if you ask them to raise their hands to show, if you ask a question, could you replace a light switch? You get like maybe 2 hands in a whole classroom. And then if you say, well, could your dad replace a light switch? And like all the hands go up. And then could your grandfather rewire a house? And then more hands go, So like there's something going on where people aren't getting these experiences traditioned down from their parents anymore. And I'm wondering, what kind of advice do you have for dads who want to pass on whatever values we could about the trades to their own children.
As St. Joseph did even to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
His son. Well, I mean, that's the whole concept of tradition in the creation sense of handing on. But then, of course, now a lot of work is in the area of technology and computers, so that's probably more what fathers hand on to their children. I think it's a collaborative again. The children have to desire to know what their father's doing, and maybe he has to be convinced of the value and importance of it. Fathers who are tradesmen. And then fathers who aren't tradesmen, now you can go online and learn many different things. I see you doing it yourself with your working on your cars, and that's a beautiful thing because your boys it's like you're reintroducing a value into our culture which has been side-railed.
Yeah, I feel like, I grew up, for better or worse, with the mentality of, well, if you can pay someone else to do it, then that's the better thing. And so I felt like, I didn't get that chance to learn how to do things with my hands directly. And so it's something I want to be able to give to my kids. And that means I have to first acquire it,
Yeah.
or at least try to acquire it with them so I can pass it down. And that's been a fun adventure to be a part of.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, Father, I know you're praying and your community is praying so well and praying for us and with us every day. And I just want to thank you once again for being with us. This is a great conversation and hopefully the first of many we have together.
You betcha. God bless you.